The rain slammed against the corrugated metal roof of the hangar like heavy artillery. A thick, waterlogged folder struck Grace directly in the chest. Dozens of shipping manifests scattered across the grease-stained concrete. Marcus leaned in so close she could smell the stale coffee and expensive cologne on his breath. "You are nothing but a pathetic, homeless orphan. Do you actually believe you have the authority to reject my cargo? I will personally ensure you never work in aviation again. You'll be back on the streets where you belong." Through the pouring rain outside the hangar doors, a man in a faded jacket stood perfectly still. He held a child closely to his side. His phone was raised, silently recording every single word of the abuse. The courage to protect others in the face of absolute greed is a light that can never be extinguished. If you believe in karma and the power of doing what is right, please leave this declaration in the comments. I choose to stand with the truth to protect innocent lives. And make sure to hit that subscribe button right now, so we can continue spreading the light of justice together. Let's go back exactly 2 hours before this ugly confrontation. A massive Category 4 hurricane was brewing just off the coast. The sky was an angry, bruised purple. Coastal rescue teams were on high alert, preparing their choppers for immediate deployment. Grace was underneath a massive transport helicopter, her hands covered in dark grease. She was the lead safety inspector for the entire regional dispatch. Her job was the only thing standing between a safe rescue mission and a fatal crash. She took her responsibility with a level of seriousness that annoyed her superiors. Growing up with absolutely nothing in the foster system had taught her the true value of human life. While she was tightening a rotor assembly, she noticed movement near the loading bay. A man dressed in worn-out jeans and a faded flannel shirt was wandering near the restricted zone. He was holding the hand of a little girl who looked no older than 7. The child was shivering violently in the damp, freezing air. Before Grace could even wipe her hands, Marcus stormed out of his climate-controlled office. He was the regional director of maritime logistics, a man who wore suits that cost more than Grace made in a year. "Hey, get the hell out of here, you filthy beggars." Marcus kicked a metal toolbox, sending a harsh echo through the hangar. "This is a secured federal facility, not a homeless shelter. Take your ratty kid and get off my property before I call security to drag you out." Grace immediately dropped her wrench, and stepped between the towering executive and the startled father. "Marcus, there's a literal hurricane outside. They just took a wrong turn seeking shelter. There is absolutely no need to speak to them like that." She ignored the director's furious glare and knelt down in front of the little girl. The child's lips were turning a pale shade of blue. Without a second thought, Grace unzipped her thick, fleece-lined aviation jacket. It was her only jacket, but she wrapped it tightly around the little girl's trembling shoulders. "Here you go, sweetheart. This will keep you nice and warm." Grace smiled warmly, handing the father a thermos of hot coffee she had on her cart. The man looked at her with a quiet, unreadable expression. "Thank you. You are very kind." Marcus scoffed loudly, rolling his eyes in absolute disgust. "Trash always protects trash. How touching." He shoved a crumpled piece of paper into Grace's chest. "Stop wasting company time on these vagrants. The emergency replacement parts just arrived at Dock 4. Sign this clearance form right now so they can load them onto the rescue birds." Grace walked over to the wooden crates sitting in the loading bay. The rain was already seeping through the cheap wood. She used her pry bar to pop the lid off the first crate. Inside were 6 main rotor blade grips, essential for flight stability. But the moment her flashlight hit the metal, her stomach dropped. The protective coating was uneven and bubbling at the edges. She rubbed her thumb over the serial number stamped on the side. The metal was porous, and the numbers were slightly misaligned. These weren't certified aeronautical-grade parts. They were cheap, counterfeit knockoffs. Putting these on a helicopter heading into a Category 4 hurricane was a guaranteed death sentence. The intense vibration of the storm would snap these grips like cheap plastic within 10 minutes of flight. "Marcus, I can't sign off on this. These are black market counterfeits. If our pilots fly into the storm with these, they will drop out of the sky." Marcus stepped into her personal space, his face turning an angry shade of red. "Listen to me very carefully, you little nobody. I secured this batch for a fraction of the cost. The supplier is kicking back a massive bonus. And if you just shut your mouth and sign, I'll give you a cut. It's enough money to get you out of this dump and buy yourself a real life." Grace stared at him in pure disbelief. "You are willing to murder our rescue crews for a bonus?" "I will not put my name on a death warrant." Marcus laughed a cold, soulless laugh. "Are you really that stupid? There's a massive storm out there. If a chopper goes down, everyone will just blame the wind. Nobody is going to check the serial numbers on a piece of wreckage at the bottom of the ocean. Sign the damn paper, Grace. If you don't, I will fire you on the spot. I'll make a few calls and have you permanently blacklisted from the aviation industry. You will lose everything." Grace looked out at the torrential rain pounding against the tarmac. She thought about the brave pilots strapping into their seats right now, trusting her with their lives. She thought about the families trapped in the flood zones, waiting for the sound of those rotor blades. Grace had absolutely nothing to fall back on. Her bank account was nearly empty. Losing this job meant she wouldn't be able to pay her rent next week. But some things were worth more than money. The lives of those pilots were not for sale. She looked down at the clipboard in her hands. Then she looked Marcus dead in the eye. She gripped the clearance form tightly in both hands. With one swift motion, she ripped the document straight down the middle. She tossed the torn pieces into the puddles on the floor. "Find someone else to do your dirty work, Marcus. Because I won't do it." Marcus's face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. He lunged forward, completely losing whatever remaining professionalism he had left. He grabbed Grace roughly by the collar of her grease-stained uniform, shaking her violently. "You stupid, ungrateful little brat. Do you have any idea what you've just done? You just threw away your only chance at a decent life. Security. Get this piece of trash off my tarmac right now." Two massive security guards in heavy rain gear rushed into the loading bay, their boots splashing heavily in the puddles. They grabbed Grace by the arms. Their grips tight and unforgiving, completely ignoring her desperate struggles. She kicked and pulled, screaming that the parts were fake, but the roaring thunder drowned out her voice. Marcus smoothed out his expensive, water-spotted suit, and picked up a spare clearance form from his messy desk. He clicked his gold-plated pen with a sickeningly arrogant smile. "I will sign this damn thing myself. And as for you, Grace, you are absolutely finished. I will personally make sure you never touch a single helicopter ever again. You will be back to digging through dumpsters by the end of the week." Before Marcus could press his pen to the paper, a calm, deeply authoritative voice echoed through the massive, echoing hangar. "Actually, Marcus, she won't be the one looking for a job tomorrow." Everyone in the hangar froze. The security guards stopped dragging Grace. Marcus turned around slowly, his eyes narrowing as he looked at the source of the unexpected interruption. It was the homeless man. The same ragged, pitiful man he had just threatened to throw out into the freezing storm. But something was completely different now. He was no longer shivering in the cold, and he was no longer holding his little daughter's hand. He stood incredibly tall, his shoulders pulled back, radiating an undeniable aura of absolute power and terrifying control. Marcus let out a cruel, mocking laugh, shaking his head in sheer disbelief. "Who the hell do you think you are, old man? Did you hit your head out there in the wind? Get back out in the rain before I have them arrest you for federal trespassing." The man didn't move a single inch. His gaze was entirely fixed on Marcus, and it was as cold as ice. Instead of speaking, he calmly reached into his faded, waterlogged jacket. He pulled out a sleek, incredibly expensive, high-tech satellite phone. He pressed a single, glowing red button on the screen. For a agonizingly long moment, nothing happened except the sound of the rain. And then, the blaring sound of heavy tactical sirens pierced through the roaring storm. The massive steel security gates of the hangar were suddenly forced open. 3 heavy, black-armored SUVs with blinding blue and red lights smashed into the loading area. Screeching to a halt, the doors flew open simultaneously. Dozens of elite federal aviation agents and heavily armed corporate security personnel swarmed the area in perfect synchronization. They bypassed Grace completely, and immediately surrounded Marcus in a tight, inescapable circle. Their hands were resting cautiously on their holstered weapons. The lead agent, a massive man with a stern face, stepped forward. He completely ignored Marcus, who was now shaking with confusion. The agent stopped in front of the man in the faded flannel shirt, and bowed respectfully. "Chairman Edward, the perimeter is 100% secured. We await your direct orders, sir." The gold-plated pen slipped from Marcus's fingers, and clattered onto the concrete floor. His jaw practically hit the floor, and every single ounce of color drained from his arrogant face. His knees began to visibly knock together. Edward was the billionaire founder and CEO of the massive international aerospace and maritime logistics conglomerate. He was the man who owned this entire facility, the fleet, and Marcus's entire career. Edward stepped forward, his eyes burning with a cold, terrifying intensity that made Marcus physically shrink back. He held up his phone, slowly pressing play on the video he had been silently recording in the shadows. The crystal-clear audio of Marcus admitting to buying counterfeit parts for a kickback echoed off the metal walls for everyone to hear. His threats, his cruelty, his absolute disregard for human life. It was all there on tape. Edward had disguised himself to inspect the reality of his own facilities, and he had found a monster. But more importantly, Edward had become the ultimate shield to protect a good person's unwavering courage. When you see justice finally served to those who abuse their power, please leave this declaration in the comments to give Grace strength. I choose to stand with the truth to protect innocent lives. Edward walked right up to Marcus, staring down at the pathetic, trembling man. You were completely willing to trade the lives of my bravest rescue pilots for a dirty supplier kickback. You are a total disgrace to this company's legacy, and you are a disgrace to humanity. You are fired, Marcus. And you are going to federal prison for a very, very long time. Marcus fell to his knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Please, Mr. Chairman, I can explain. I have a family, I have debts. Please don't do this to me. Edward didn't even blink. Get him out of my sight. The federal agents immediately grabbed Marcus, roughly yanking him to his feet. They slapped a pair of cold steel handcuffs tightly onto his wrists. He whimpered and begged the entire way as they dragged him out into the freezing rain and threw him into the back of the armored vehicle. He had lost his prestigious job, his stolen wealth, and his freedom in the blink of an eye. He would never work in this industry. Or any industry. Ever again. Edward turned around and walked slowly over to Grace. The two security guards who had been restraining her immediately let go, and stepped back in pure, unadulterated terror. Grace was completely speechless, rubbing her bruised arms, staring wide-eyed at the billionaire standing before her. Suddenly, Edward's little girl ran out from the climate-controlled office. She was still wearing Grace's oversized, fleece-lined aviation jacket, which trailed on the floor behind her. She ran straight past her father and threw her tiny arms tightly around Grace's legs. Thank you for keeping me warm, jacket angel. Grace's eyes filled with hot tears as she gently patted the little girl's head. Edward smiled, his previously cold and terrifying demeanor completely melting away into profound warmth. Grace, this entire company was built on the foundation of absolute integrity. And today, in the face of incredible pressure, you were the only one in this hangar who showed any. Those counterfeit parts will be confiscated as evidence and destroyed immediately. The certified backups have already been cleared, and they will be loaded onto the choppers right now. But more importantly, I need someone with your fierce, unshakable moral compass leading this entire division. Effective immediately, you are the new global director of aviation safety for the entire conglomerate. Absolutely nobody's cargo flies anywhere in the world without your personal, stamped approval. Grace burst into tears, covering her mouth with her trembling, grease-stained hands in sheer disbelief. Her selfless kindness and incredible bravery had just saved dozens of pilots from a fiery crash. And in return, it had completely and forever changed her own destiny. Right now, let's leave a beautiful prayer of blessing for her in the comments below. I choose to stand with the truth to protect innocent lives. As the massive storm finally began to break, a brilliant sliver of golden sunlight pierced through the dark, heavy clouds. The warm light illuminated the massive hangar, casting a hopeful glow over everything. Outside on the tarmac, the rescue helicopters fired up their massive engines. Their newly installed, certified rotors spun flawlessly as they lifted off to go save lives in the flooded zones. Edward stood there in the quiet hangar, looking at Grace. He wasn't looking at her as a powerful chairman evaluating an employee. He was looking at her as a single father who was deeply, profoundly moved by her pure, beautiful heart. He slowly reached into the pocket of his faded jeans. He got down on one knee right there on the cold, oil-stained concrete. He pulled out a small, elegant velvet box and opened it, revealing a stunning diamond ring. Grace, you protected my precious daughter from the freezing cold when no one else cared. And you protected my brave pilots from certain death when it would have been so easy to look away. I have traveled the world, but I have never, ever met a woman as incredibly brave and fiercely compassionate as you. Will you do me the absolute greatest honor of my life, and marry me? Grace looked down at the beautiful, sparkling ring. Then she looked at the sweet little girl holding onto her hand, smiling up at her. And finally, she looked into the loving eyes of the man who had just changed her entire world. With happy tears streaming down her face, she nodded yes, unable to speak. A brave and selfless heart will always receive the brightest and most beautiful sky in the end. Make this powerful promise to yourself right now in the comments. I choose to stand with the truth to protect innocent lives. Thank you so much for watching this incredible story of justice and love. Please make sure to hit that subscribe button right now, so we can meet again in our next healing journey.